In this section, we're going to take a look at transformations of functions, and the types of transformations we're going to look at are going to fall into three categories: shifts, scalings, and reflections. And we'll take these one at a time, and then eventually we'll talk about what happens when we combine multiple transformations. And so first, this example is going to take a look at shifts of functions. So to review what we've seen about shifting functions, when we are adding or subtracting a constant on the outside, this is going to give us a vertical shift. And so if we're adding that constant, then we're going to get a vertical shift up. And if we're subtracting that constant, we're going to get a vertical shift down. When we do the adding or the subtracting, and what we'll say is inside the function, inside the parentheses, then we get a horizontal shift. So for example, f of x plus h is going to give us a horizontal shift to the left by h units. So one thing to look out for, and that is when we add on the inside, we actually get a shift to the left. Okay, so we actually move in the opposite direction, kind of in the negative horizontal direction. And when we subtract on the inside, we actually get a shift to the right in the positive direction. So we kind of move in a direction opposite to what we might have expected. Okay, so let's take a look at an example on the next slide. In this example, we start with a graph of a function f, which is shown above, and in parts A and B, we apply some transformations to this function, and we want to first describe the transformation that is made and then sketch the corresponding graph for that function. So starting in part A, notice we have x minus 3, and this transformation is happening on the inside of this function. So when we have inside transformations, this means that it's going to be a horizontal change. And so the x-coordinate of each point is going to be transformed, whereas the y-coordinate is going to be fixed. And since we have a subtraction by 3, remember these inside transformations kind of move in the opposite direction. So this subtraction by 3 means we're going to have a horizontal shift in the positive direction to the right by 3 units. So that's the transformation that we're going to make. So this means that every point gets moved 3 units to the right. So the graph that we have down here is the graph of f. And so what we're going to do is shift every point on this graph to the right by 3 units. So we pick this graph up and we move it 1, 2, 3 units to the right. And we wind up with a graph about here. And so for example, the point that we start with over here at minus 2, 6, this point gets moved 3 units to the right. So we add 3 to the x-coordinate, and now we can see down here that exactly it winds up at the point 1, 6. And the point at minus 1, 4, this point gets moved 3 units to the right, so adding 3 to the y-coordinate, to the x-coordinate, puts us at 2, 4. And we can see that point on the graph over here. And we do that for every other point. So this is a shift to the right by 3 units in part A. In part B, now we have this transformation which is happening outside. We have the minus 3 which is going on outside. So when we have outside transformations, these are vertical changes. And the vertical transformations, they are performed as we would expect. What I mean by that is this subtraction by 3 means we move the graph in the negative direction 3 units down. So this is going to be a shift down by 3 units. So every point on the graph gets moved down by 3 units. So taking a look at the graph that we have down here in part B, here was the original graph for f, and now we're going to take this graph and move it 1, 2, 3 units straight down, and we wind up with a graph that I have in part B. And so keeping tally of a couple of key points on this graph, the point, say over here on the left, that started off at minus 2, 6, we move this point straight down by 3 units. So the x-coordinate doesn't change, the y-coordinate we subtract 3 from, and this puts us at minus 2, 3. And that's this point over here that I've marked in red. And the point that started at minus 1, 4, it gets moved 3 units straight down, and it winds up at minus 1, 1. And that's this point over here. And we do that for every other point. So in the end, this is going to be a shift of every point down by 3 units. And in part A, we had a shift to the right by 3 units. And in both cases, the shape of the graph remains the same. We just pick up the graph and move it either straight to the right or straight down in part B.